He left his wife for a younger woman, but karma taught him a bitter lesson. The rain poured heavily that night, drumming against the zinc roof like the beating of a troubled heart. Nkechi sat by the window, staring at the darkness outside, her hands trembling. She had seen the signs, ignored the whispers, and convinced herself that it was just her imagination. But today, her worst fear had become reality. Her husband, Emeka, was leaving her. Emeka stood near the door, avoiding her gaze. He looked sharp in his new suit, a scent of expensive collagen filling the air. "Nkechi, I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice cold. "I found someone else. She makes me happy." Nkechi felt the world around her collapse. For 15 years, she had been the perfect wife, cooking, cleaning, raising their children, standing by him when he had nothing. Now when success had finally smiled on him, he had found a younger, prettier woman. "Emeka, what about the children?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I will take care of them," he replied carelessly. "But I can't keep pretending to love you." Tears streamed down her face as she watched him pick up his suitcase and walk out of their home, stepping into the waiting car of a young light-skinned woman who giggled as he entered. Nkechi felt something inside her shatter. For weeks, she cried herself to sleep. Neighbors whispered, some pitied her, others mocked her. But life did not stop. She had to be strong for her children. Meanwhile, Emeka lived in luxury with his new lover, Amara. She was everything he thought he wanted. Young, beautiful, and full of life. She dressed in expensive clothes and introduced him to a world of parties and excitement. But unknown to him, karma had already set its plan in motion. Nkechi lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Emeka's words echoed in her mind, stabbing her heart like a sharp knife. "I can't keep pretending to love you." She had given him her youth, her love, her loyalty, and now he had thrown her away like a piece of old cloth. Morning came with a cruel reminder of reality. The bed beside her was empty, the children were still asleep, and her world had changed forever. The neighbors already knew. She could hear them whispering outside. Nkechi wanted to call into a ball and disappear, but she had no choice. Life had to go on. Dragging herself to the kitchen, she prepared breakfast for her children, forcing a smile as she woke them up. "Mommy, where is Daddy?" Little Chima asked, rubbing his eyes. Nkechi swallowed the lump in her throat. "Daddy traveled," she lied. How could she explain to a 5-year-old that their father had abandoned them? Meanwhile, Emeka was enjoying his new life. He convinced himself that he had made the right decision. One evening, Emeka drove past his old house in his brand new car. He saw Nkechi walking home from the market carrying a heavy basket. She looked thinner, weaker, yet still held her head high. Their eyes met for a brief second, but he quickly looked away and sped off. Nkechi felt her heart twist in pain, but she refused to cry. Instead, she whispered, "God sees everything." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Nkechi worked tirelessly to provide for her children. She started a small business, selling food by the roadside. It wasn't easy, but she managed. She learned to smile again, to laugh with her children, to live without Emeka. Then, one day, a stranger walked up to her stall. Aged woman dressed in fine clothes stood before her, eyes filled with concern. "Are you Emeka's wife?" she asked softly. "I was," Nkechi corrected, her voice steady. The woman sighed. "My dear, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but your husband is in trouble. Amara is not who he thinks she is." Nkechi's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The woman hesitated, then leaned closer. "She has destroyed many men before him, and now She's about to destroy him too. Nkechi's finger tightened around the money she was holding. She had moved on, or at least she thought she had. But something told her that Emeka's nightmare was just beginning. The night air was heavy with music and laughter. Emeka sat in the VIP section of a luxurious club, a glass of expensive champagne in his hand. Amara sat beside him, dressed in a tight red gown that sparkled under the dim lights. She laughed at something one of her friends said, but Emeka barely heard it. His mind was clouded. Something felt off. Since leaving Nkechi, his life has changed dramatically. He had more money, more freedom, more fun. But lately, he had been noticing things. Small, strange things. His business, which had once flourished, was slowly sinking. Deals that had once been easy were suddenly slipping through his fingers. "Baby, let's dance," Amara called, pulling him towards the dance floor. He forced a smile and followed her, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He had ignored the warning signs for too long. Now, the whispers in his head were growing louder. That night, Emeka returned to Amara's house feeling uneasy. As she went to shower, he reached out for her handbag, something he had never done before. His fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. His heart pounded as he pulled out a small, strange-looking charm, wrapped in red cloth. His breath caught. His mother had warned him about things like this. He had laughed at her superstitions, but now, holding the charm in his hands, shaking, fear gripped his chest. The bathroom door creaked open. Amara stepped out, wrapped in a towel, her eyes locking onto the object in his hands. For the first time since he met her, her face changed. The sweet, innocent smile disappeared. A dark, cold look replaced it. "Why are you touching my things, Emeka?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. He swallowed hard. "What is this?" Amara stepped forward slowly, her wet feet leaving prints on the tiled floor. "You should never have looked into my bag." A chill ran down his spine. The woman he thought he loved suddenly felt like a stranger. He dropped the charm and backed away. "What have you done to me?" She chuckled, shaking her head. "What have I done? Emeka, I only gave you what you wanted. Money, success, pleasure." She picked up the charm and held it up. "But all things come at a price." His stomach turned. His legs felt weak. You used me?" Amaka tilted her head. "Used you? No, my dear. I owned you. From the moment you left your wife for me, you became mine." Emeka's heart pounded against his chest. He grabbed his car keys and stumbled towards the door. But her voice stopped him. "If you leave, everything will collapse. Your wealth, your business, your health, everything." He hesitated. His hands shook. He had worked too hard to build his empire. Could he risk losing it all? Amara smirked, walking past him. "The choice is yours, my love. Stay and enjoy the life I gave you, or walk away and watch it all burn." Emeka stood frozen, his mind racing. Deep inside, he already knew his nightmare had only just begun. Emeka barely slept that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind tangled in confusion and fear. The woman beside him was no longer the sweet, innocent girl he had fallen for. She was something else, something darker. By morning, his world had begun to crumble. His phone rang non-stop, each call bringing terrible news. One of his biggest business deals had fallen through. A client who owed him billions had disappeared. The bank sent a message. His account was in the red. Sweat gathered on his forehead. He had never experienced such a streak of bad luck. Was it a coincidence? Or was it Amara? She's been the one behind his success all along. He rushed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. His reflection stared back at him. Eyes sunken, skin pale. He looked different, like a man losing himself. Emeka, what is wrong? Amara's voice floated from the bedroom. Everything is falling apart, Amara. My business, my money. She sat on the bed, calmly painting her nails. I told you, love, if you leave me, everything collapses. His fists clenched. You are behind all this, aren't you? She smiled, slow and knowing. I simply gave you what you wanted, but you were foolish, Emeka. You thought you could take from me and walk away freely? He felt sick. His chest tightened. He needed to escape. He needed help. That evening, he drove to his old neighborhood, parking a few houses away from his former home. He sat there for hours, staring at the house where Nkechi and his children still lived. The curtains were drawn, but through a small gap, he saw Nkechi moving around, helping the children with their schoolwork. She looked peaceful. A painful lump formed in his throat. Nkechi, the woman he had abandoned, was still standing strong, while in his own life, he was falling apart. Guilt was written all over him. He wanted to go inside, to beg for forgiveness, but how could he face her after all he had done? Instead, he drove to his mother's house. The moment she saw him, she gasped. Emeka, look at you. What is happening to you? He sank to his knees. Mama, I made a mistake. His mother placed her wrinkled hands on his head, whispering prayers. I warned you, my son. I told you that no good comes from abandoning your wife for another woman. Tears burned his eyes. Mama, I don't know what to do. I think Amara did something to me. His mother sighed heavily. Then you must go back to where you left your blessings, my son. But I fear it may be already too late. A deep chill ran through him. Too late? No, it couldn't be. That night, he returned to Amara's house. His mind made up. He had to end whatever hold she had on him. But as he stepped through the door, he froze. Amara was seated on the couch, dressed in a black robe, a single candle flickering in front of her. In her hand was something that made his blood run cold. His old wedding ring, the one he had thrown away when he left Nkechi. She looked up at him, her lips curling into a smile. I was waiting for you, Emeka. A cold, airy silence filled the room. Something told him this was the moment his nightmare would become reality. Emeka's breath came in short gaps. His eyes darted between Amara and the candle flickering before her. The dim light cast airy shadows on her face, making her look less human and more like a dark spirit. His heart pounded. Sit, Amara said, patting the pace beside her. Emeka took a shaky step back. What are you doing with my wedding ring? She rolled the ring between her fingers. Her nails painted blood red. This ring carried your destiny, Emeka. The moment you threw it away, you threw away everything that was meant for you. A cold chill ran through him. What do you mean? Amara let out a small laugh, but there was no warmth in it. Nkechi was your blessing. She was the woman who carried your grace, your success, your protection. The day you left her, you walked away from everything good in your life. And now, she leaned forward, eyes gleaming like a predator. You belong to me. Emeka's knees felt weak. He had heard stories, tales of men who left their good wives for younger women only to meet destruction. He never believed them until now. With trembling hands, he reached for the ring, "Give it to me," he pleaded. Amara smiled, "Walden, it's too late, my love." Suddenly, the candle flickered violently, and a strong wind rushed through the room. Though the windows were shut, Emeka felt something tightened around his chest, like invisible hands squeezing the life out of him. He fell to his knee, gasping. "Please, Amara, let me go." She watched him struggle, tittling her head. "Go where? Back to Nkechi? Back to the life you destroyed? No, Emeka. That door is closed forever." A loud clap of thunder shook the house, and the lights flickered. Emeka felt his strength leaving him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. His visions blurred. And then came darkness. 2 years later, Nkechi sat outside her new shop counting the day's earning. The small food business she started had grown, and now she owned a full restaurant. Life had not been easy, but she had pushed forward. Her children were doing well. She had found peace. As she packed up for the night, a figure stumbled toward her. Her breath caught. For a moment, she thought she was seeing a ghost. Emeka? But he was barely recognizable. His once broad shoulders were hunched. His skin, once glowing, was now pale and sickly. His eyes, hollow and lost. He knelt before her, tears streaming down his face. "Nkechi, please forgive me." She stared at him, emotions clashing inside her. This was the man who had walked out on her, the man who had left her to suffer. But now, karma had repaid him in full. Nkechi took a deep breath. "I forgave you a long time ago, Emeka," she said, her voice steady. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I will take you back." His body shook with silent sobs. "I have nothing left," he whispered. She gazed at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You made your choice, Emeka. Now, live with it." And with that, she walked away, leaving him kneeling in the dust, just as he had left her many years ago. Moral lesson: never abandon the person who stood by you when you had nothing. You may find temporary pleasure elsewhere, but karma never forgets.